cocaine. Casey Jones, you better watch your speed. Trouble ahead, trouble behind. And know that notion just crossed my mind. This old engine makes it on time.
Vanessa, welcome to Talking the Talk with Don.
Hello, how are you?
I'm awesome.
Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it so much.
Well, I feel like we've been working on this for a while, so
Yes.
I'm glad the stars aligned, and I'm also so glad that you could do day interview. Like I love doing day interviews because I'm old.
Yeah.
I like to be in bed by like 8:30, and some of these guys or gals also that I interview, especially if they're on the West Coast, they're like, "Can you do 7 p.m.?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And they're like, "My time," and I'm like, "Really?"
No.
I'm like, I'll take a nap.
Yeah,
I'll take a nap during the day so that I can make it through the 45 minutes at 10 o'clock. But
yeah, I'm a mom with a young child, so I'm up with the crack of dawn.
I'm a morning. I love mornings. I think mornings are like, I don't know. If it's got great energy and I can have my coffee and get started.
I probably get my best work done in the morning. Like you can really focus, and I absorb the most that I'm reading in the morning.
Yeah. I get up right away and I start opening up all my music news sites and start reading.
Yeah.
It's so funny. Like most people are pulling up like CNN, and I'm pulling up like Blabbermouth and the Obelisk, for like all the psych rock and stuff, and that's my daily news. So
Yeah, fair enough.
So my big question for you to start out was like, if you were to walk, because usually I interview musicians and
Right.
and they have, I usually use like one of their songs or whatever as the intro and the outro. So like, what would your walk-on music be? Like, let's say like this was a talk, this is a kind of a talk show. Like, what would your walk-on song be?
Only because, I feel like that would change on any given day. The first song that comes to my mind is Casey Jones.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
Well, that'll be your walk-on music then. I love
Perfect.
it. So
cool.
Because my wife got me into TikTok actually.
Oh, really?
And started well, and really, I'm just a lurker. I just watch. And when I stumbled upon you, I was so ecstatic because I'm a sucker and a dork myself for just music information and just
honestly, I had no idea what I was getting into when I started TikTok. I didn't understand the app. I wasn't I didn't have it for a while before I started posting or anything.
Mm-hmm.
I just picked it up one day and decided to start talking about music, and it just kind of turned into this whole different thing, So, and now I feel like I have kind of a formula that I follow, but like my earlier videos were just sort of very TikTok-y, So.
Right. And, it's so funny because, I'm sure a lot of people who are going to listen to this are at least familiar with TikTok. But, one of the things I have loved about TikTok is that there's these little, I don't know, like TikTok universes or something, and if you kind of hone in on one thing, you tend to kind of get sucked into that world, which I love because mine is, like if you pulled up my TikTok, everything is like UFO conspiracy theory, paranormal crap, and music, which
Nice.
is like, it's just the shit that I find interesting, and like
Totally.
And the funny thing is that your tag on Instagram, you kind of say you're like Martha Quinn, and I loved that because, well, not only did I have the biggest crush on Martha Quinn when I was younger, like she to me was like the epitome of like the cool like music dork kind of thing, like she had this real persona, like that she really knew a lot about music. So where did that come from for you? Like have you always been interested in music you like as my wife calls it, useless information. You know, it's like
basically, like, yeah. I can't really remember a time in my life where I wasn't obsessed with music. Like my first favorite band, I think we talked about it before, was the Monkees.
Yeah.
And that was like, I was
mine,
like,
right?
Like
we talked about
8 years old. Yeah. You know what I mean? I was really young. And like knew everything about them, you know. And then as I got older, I got into like my own music. But yeah, like I was always kind of like the girl in the room who knew all the random stuff about music. It's getting a little windy. Are you picking that up? Or
it's fine.
You're good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's natural. Hey, let's go with it.
All right.
Because this is so professional, you know?
But yeah, I just always was the girl who knew a lot about music, and I just listened to everything. You know, I never really was stuck on like one particular genre. I always sort of had a really diverse palette. Like I was listening to the Beatles at the same time as Nirvana, you know what I mean? When I was like 13, 14, made no difference. I loved it all, you know, and music documentaries, behind the music, and Much Music, MTV, you know, like I just watched so much of it when I was a kid, when I was a teenager. That I think it's just like embedded in me now, and I just can't help but make videos that kind of sound like that. I don't know. And that's one of the comments that I get the most often, is that I sort of remind people of classic Much Music, or, you know, like old stuff like that, which is one of the reasons why I like to have sort of a nod to Martha, because, you know, it's just sort of a throwback, but also like, I feel like I kind of am similar to that style. Like I can't really get away from it. So yeah, big inspiration.
Well, yeah, it's so funny because the other thing too is, unfortunately, you know, women aren't always represented, or very rarely represented, in the music history
criticism.
Yes, exactly. You know, like one of my closest friends is a writer up in New York. Her name's Catherine Turman. And I used to read her stuff. She used to write for a metal magazine called Rip Magazine back when I was in like high school. And like, she is this wealth of just knowledge and stories and information.
That's awesome.
And,
yeah,
you know, and it always kind of disappointed me that not only are women not represented as much as they should be, but I think people aren't represented as like, I wish there was more of us, you know, that were like, you know.
Yeah. I think that music, and like some genres worse than others, but like music can be very sort of gate kept. You know what I mean? Which is something that I really try to.
What do you mean?
I mean, like people, specifically men, tend to really like try to put barriers up, you know what I mean, for others to listen to the music. They're like, you can't like this band because you're X, you know, or you don't like this band because you haven't heard this, you know. And there's sort of all these prerequisites for liking music, you know what I mean? And it's kind of weird. And I feel like a lot of the time it's just like, if you're female, you don't know anything about metal, punk, you know what I mean, etc. Even country, hip hop, like, you know, all of it really. And it's, you know, it's something that I think women have been kind of fighting against for decades, you know, to be more included, to be more regarded. And I think a lot of female musicians have kind of slid under the rug as a result of that, which is kind of a shame. You know what I mean? Like most people list off 10 male-led punk bands, you know, like in a minute, but name a female one and people might have to think a little harder, you know what I mean? But they existed, right? Like that's the thing. So yeah, I think it kind of all falls into that, and especially in criticism as well, of course, like, and history, you know, I mean, in what field is there where women aren't considered sort of not lesser, but I don't know, you know, just not sort of looked at on the same level, you know?
Well, it was so funny because one of the first things I thought of when I started watching your videos was I said, this woman would have been the perfect addition to my lunch table in high school, because I had like two friends, like all through, maybe no, three, I had three friends all through high school.
Yeah.
And like we prided ourselves on like, did you know that there was a singer for Black Sabbath who auditioned, but only was in the band long enough to take a promo picture? And his name is David Donato. Do you know what I mean? And my friends,
absolutely,
and they'd be like, "Oh yeah, well, okay, well, I'm gonna find out something." You know what I mean? And so we prided ourselves on just knowing
these little tidbits, and yeah.
But it comes from being, like you said, like a fan of music, not a genre, not, even to this day, if I discover an artist or a band that I really like I want all the albums, like I want the bootlegs, I want to see the old videos, I want, you know what I mean? Like I want to know what their previous band, so I mean, like, but I've just always been that way, because to me, being a fan of music goes beyond just being like, oh, that's a cool song. Like to me,
I agree. Yeah. I love the context. And I think that's kind of what I based most of my videos on, is I like to take a song or like an artist or an album and really like stick it in the time that it came out, and like what else was out and what was happening in the world, and, like what might have affected that particular artist to cause them to create this art,
Right.
And I think that all of that sort of like brings it to life. You know what I mean? I think that's what people like us, like music geeks, I think that's what we love, is like, bringing it to life, making it a real thing, making it feel like these people, like, and I think it's obviously easier with some bands than others, because some bands are really, there's not a lot of information about them. You really have to dig, but then there's other bands like Nirvana where like every single thing that could be written about Kurt Cobain has already been written, kind of thing.
Right. But at the same time, what's the cool thing about that is that, to me, I like to compare that to just any band in general. So like if I shared, like I sent you this playlist, recently, which by the way, there's going to be a quiz. No, I'm just kidding. But like some of the bands that in that playlist are bands that I've been listening to for like 5, 6, 8 years, whereas they're going to be brand new to you,
Totally.
So even if there's everything that has been written about Nirvana from Kurt Cobain's birth to his death, someone who stumbles upon one of your videos is going to be hearing this for the first time. And
and that's like kind of the magic of being a music lover, right? Like it's passing that on to the next generation,
Well, it totally is, because I think a lot of times people underestimate also the power of a cool story or a little tidbit of, knowledge. And being, 48, you schooled me recently on Man in the Box by Alice in Chains, which I had no idea that was where that song came from. But that's
cool. That's a really cool story. I liked that.
So it was amazing. But see, what I loved about that was that I've been an Alice in Chains fan since Facelift. But for some reason in my mind, like I could tell you that, Lane Staley was in a hair band or glam band called Alice in Chains and all that. But for some reason, I never really thought to even care what Man in the Box was about. And then when I saw your video, the first thing I did was I went and put it on, and I was like,
and then you listen to it and you're like, oh, totally. Yeah.
But so like, that's a good example of, people who really are passionate about wanting to know anything and everything about music, is that you're never going to know it all. And
everything. That's so true. That is very true, for sure.
So, and I love that again about your videos and stuff though. But like, so where do you start to like what
Do the research.
how do you decide what you're going to talk about? Like, do you kind of have like a hit list of artists that you make and then you work your way through it, or like, is it organic or what is it?
Yeah, I kind of just like I usually make my list for the month. So I'm like, okay, this is everything I'm going to cover in April, and it's flexible. Like if, for example, if someone dies or something, then it all gets thrown out of whack.
Right.
But or if something happens in my personal life where I'm not able to like produce as much, you know what I mean? But for the most part, I have my list, and I try to keep it really diverse. Like I'll be like, okay, I just talked about grunge a whole bunch, so now I need to like do something kind of really different, but not totally off. You know what I mean? So I'm going to do like a female band from the 90s. So like not grunge, but like, you know what I mean? So I try to keep like the flow so that people who have just listened to the last video are still interested. But it's also attracting new people kind of thing. And then as soon as I'm done with that video, I'm going to like shoot back to the 60s and do the Grateful Dead video, like I was telling you.
Right.
So it's just sort of all over the place, right? But it's what I love about it is that it's always about an artist, and it's always about their creative process and everything. And there's so much in common between these artists, even though they're like completely unrelated. Like, I mean, the story of like how Marvin Gaye produced his album is not that unlike how the Dead produced theirs, you know, but like totally different genres.
Right.
And like you find a lot of familiarity in it. You can learn a lot about the music industry by learning all these kinds of different stories and how it's evolved over the years. So I just try to make it flow.
Right.
But I also try to throw in different surprises and things like that too, you know, just kind of keep it fresh. I don't want to talk about grunge for a month, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, so when you are when you're kind of coming up with some ideas of artists to talk about, or like kind of conceptualizing what you're going to talk about, do you ever draw to or go to maybe say like an artist or a genre that you maybe know nothing about, but you're like,
totally.
So like what was a particular art, like video or artist that you've done that you found yourself completely
learning it all
and like that
fresh?
You learned? Yeah.
Well, what I'm working on right now, I had a request from someone who lives in France, actually. And they said, like, can you do some French music? And I was like, I don't really know a lot about French music. You know what I mean? I've never really looked into it at all. So I'm trying to learn a bit more about it now. And like, it turns out there's like this whole pop music in France and a movement in France in the 1960s with like music by Serge Gainsbourg and like all these people like that. So I'm learning all of this fresh. And it's fascinating. You know what I mean? Like, and it's funny how like you learn that it's all, like I was saying before, it's all very similar. You know what I mean? Even though it's on the other side of the world, it's usually all about, you know, social issues and what was going on in the world at the time. And obviously France, 1960s, it was very much like the sexual revolution and all of that, Serge Gainsbourg. So then you get into this whole other world of context, right? Like what was going on in Europe at that time, you know, like how was it different than Britain? How was it different than the US, you know? It's fascinating for sure. And honestly, I was telling you, I don't know that much about metal. So every time I like go to do a metal band, I'm like, I back up a little bit because I'm like, I know how serious metal fans are about their love of their music, and I don't want to like do it wrong, you know? So I need to educate myself a bit more before I'm able to jump into that genre, I think. Like obviously I know a little bit about the background, I know a little bit of Ozzy Osbourne, that kind of stuff. But when it comes to like Anthrax, Mayhem, bands like that, I'm kind of lost. So I'm really just sort of learning about it now. And what I love about metal, just to go off on a tangent,
Yes,
is that all the many little subgenres of metal are also interesting in themselves. You know, like thrash metal, death metal, black metal, like so many different types of music, and it brings this whole other element into it. Yeah, I find it really interesting. What do you? I'd love to hear your kind of opinion about that, being sort of an expert.
Well, I don't know that I'd call myself an expert, but to kind of just like backtrack a little bit, and one of the things that you were talking about how you were saying, and I feel like that's that I can totally bond with you on this, is that, you know, even as a kid growing up as a metalhead, you know, like a really, really into metal, it wasn't weird for me to be really into the Monkees and Mike Nesmith.
Totally.
But then to also be into the Allman Brothers band, and and to have some interest in Jefferson Airplane, and because and even now I kind of go by the whole concept of, if a song is good, it's good, and I'm going to like it. I don't have to like the artist, the artist's full body of work,
Totally. Yeah.
And so with metal, you might run into a lot of people who are like these like diehard rivet heads or whatever, and who are just like, metal or die, dude, and like, but like for me, I've got my favorite bands, and Iron Maiden, my two favorite bands in the world are Iron Maiden and the Grateful Dead. So that tells you the spectrum.
Really?
Oh yeah. I mean, those are
that's awesome.
I mean, if I had to go down, if I had to die the next day, I would see those two bands to get, like,
I was going to say, is that Jerry Garcia behind you? Is that
Jerry
Garcia?
Which is so funny, because I've got my Garcia behind me, and I've got my Iron Maiden flag over here, so it's like, but as far as being a fan of metal, from what I've seen and what I know of people, especially that they're my age, is that they're really not much more critical than, say, like, a fan of jazz or a punk or blues. But now there is going to be kind of an elitist kind of attitude in a sense that's like, it is kind of like, thin ice to walk on a little bit. So like if you were to do a video about, say like Maiden, I'm going to watch that, and but the funny thing is that like
dissect it.
well, because like one of the first things I do, especially if it's a band that I love, is that like I'm waiting for someone to say something wrong. Like I just want it. Like I'm just
exactly.
Like, like I'm just like, no, you forgot this, or whatever. But I think with it, when it comes to metal, most metal fans are excited to have people come in and
fair enough. That's
learn
good to know
about, or be interested in it. Because, I put out a book a couple of years ago, and one of the things I've learned is that much like the Deadhead culture, the Deadhead culture, the metalhead culture, is that, they're both kind of like a countercultural movement within themselves.
Really, yeah, definitely.
I mean, nobody goes on Iron Maiden tour though, and there's no like lot scene at like Megadeth shows, but there is that same kind of passion and that same kind of, but at the same time, there's a critical ear, even if as big of a Maiden fan as I am or whatever, I'll be the first one to call out if they didn't sound good at a show.
Fair enough. Yeah.
But at the same time, if you were just like, I know nothing about Maiden, Don, can we talk about Maiden? 45 minutes later, you'll just be like, God,
totally.
About Maiden.
Yeah.
God,
So, I get that. I totally get that.
So I think if you were going into it, like, go into it,
Yeah, fair enough.
But but much like you've done with your videos, though, what I love about it is you go into it with what you know.
Yeah, I try to bring it back to what I know, at least. Like for example, if I were to do Maiden, I would start out by listening to what I would look up, like what people consider the best. You know what I mean? Like what generally is considered the best. I would listen to that, and then I would sort of like look into the stories, and like where's the story, right? Like that's kind of how I'll approach it. So I'll look into the background of the band, like the members of the band, what they were into, what they were inspired by, that kind of stuff. And eventually the story just kind of comes out, right? Like, and in the process, I'm learning so much more about the band than I even mention in the video,
Right.
And I often will become like fans of some of the work that I do. Long ago when I first started the account, like in the summertime, somebody suggested that I look up Johnny Thunders. That's actually a good answer to the earlier question you asked. I didn't know much about him. Big punk fan, and I knew the New York Dolls, I knew the Heartbreakers, but I didn't know much about him. And once I started learning about his story and everything, I was just like devastated by it. You know what I mean?
It's like such a dark story. It's like
very sad figure for sure. But I mean, and then when I started listening to his solo work, I was like, this is incredible, and then you learn some bad stuff about them too. You know what I mean? And like, you kind of like, all right, so they weren't perfect. And that's like a whole other thing, like getting past sort of the criticism as well, which comes up a lot, of course, when you're talking about any historical figures. So,
right. Well, so you have, and I hope I wrote this down right, 164,000 followers.
Pretty crazy.
164,000. That's like
it blows my mind.
That's like an outdoor music festival. That's crazy.
It blows my mind, really.
Well, so with that many followers, you almost have not so much of a pressure, but an expectation from your followers to turn out a certain number of videos or whatever. And you get these things down to like 3 minutes, which is insane to me because I can talk about the album title of a band for 3 minutes,
I know. Yeah.
So how do you do it? How do you get it down to that? And are you shooting like 30, 40 minutes worth of
and then editing
and then whittling it down?
So when I first started doing it, yes, that's what I was doing. I was shooting way more footage than I needed. But then it was literally just taking me like 6 hours to edit, and I was like, I can't, you know what I mean? I'll produce one video a week if I do this. So I had to scale it back, and I basically just try to, like, now I'm focused on like songs or albums instead of whole artists, because I find that that's a way to kind of narrow in a little bit more. Because like you can definitely go off on big tangents, but like, I mean, for example, I'd say probably like, it's cliche, but the band I probably know the most about in the world is the Beatles. And like, I've read several biographies. I've seen every documentary and movie, I could talk about them for a long time. But I mean, you have to kind of, it's like, if I were talking about Strawberry Fields, for example, like, I'm not going to go into John's childhood. I'm not going to go into, I'm not going to talk about like the influence of Rubber Soul. I'm going to keep it very focused, like on Strawberry Fields, Beatles in 67, like the influences at the time, what else was happening in 67, because there's always time for more videos.
You must not
always
have
come
ADHD.
Back to an artist, right?
Like, you must not have ADHD, because I don't even know how I could even function doing something like that. Like, I'm just going to concentrate on this,
Yeah. I'm a history major. Maybe that has something to do with it.
Well, that makes sense, because you have that knowledge already of how to kind of make
like write an essay of a various length, right? Yeah, so I do think that background definitely helps significantly with what I'm doing. I never found a use for it before.
Well, now, I mean, it's amazing because, you know, you have this platform now to work with. And, you know, from what I've known and what I've seen, everything is done mobile, you know, like whether you're using an iPhone or an iPad.
Yeah.
Is that how you film everything? And if so, like how fucking tedious is that for you? You know?
I have a system now. But yeah, I generally just film everything on my iPhone. And then I do almost all of my editing on my laptop. I don't do it on TikTok. That's actually probably one of the biggest things that like sets my channel apart is I'm not fully using the TikTok app to edit.
Okay, well then that makes things a little less painful.
I wouldn't. Oh my God, it's horrible. Yeah. Like, I mean, just because I use so many clips of videos and, you know, clip photos and all kinds of stuff like that. It's just so much easier to edit sort of on a different program because I can't, like, I would go blind just doing this all day, you know, like with my fingers. So
drive me crazy.
Yeah, not possible. But yeah, so it's a lot of transferring from my iPhone to my Mac and back and forth, you know. But otherwise, I've got a system now.
So I pay attention a lot to comments, not always, but a lot of times, especially on with something like your videos, like, because I like to read what people are writing. Sometimes
it's really great. Sometimes it's not.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you, because I am no stranger to being hated on the internet. And how is it hard to roll with that? Or do you just, I mean, at least for me, I know at the first time, at first it's like, you know, it was so hard for me, but then all of a sudden I was like,
I don't care anymore.
I just became I took on the persona of the music writer, like, you know, Lester Bangs. Like, I wanted to piss people off and it made me happy. So
very much so. You know? Yeah. I mean, Lester Bangs is someone I keep in mind as well a lot. And, you know, any of those old school music writers, because they didn't give any shits, you know what I mean?
He's my spirit animal. Yeah, if you ever read some of my other stuff on my blog, I've had people say,
I really want to read your book. I really do. Just as a side note, I really want to read your book. So
I'll make sure I send you one, because I've got like a stack of them over here that aren't.
Oh yeah, please do.
Dust on them.
No, I would love to. And like my partner and I were looking at some reviews of it the other night, and we were like, wow, we both really want to read it now. So,
well, you know, you'll learn some stuff about rats, and
that's awesome. Yeah, like, you know? I'm excited. Anyways, back to what you were asking. Yeah, trolls and stuff like that. Like, I've had videos that I've had to take down because of the negative, because way too much negative commentary. Because music like means a lot to me, you know what I mean? And I know it means a lot to other people too, right? And like, there are artists who, like, I mean, it's not an overstatement to say that music can like literally save lives, right? So I find when people then attack it with their full force, you know, the way that people do on the internet, it affects me, but it also affects my followers. It affects the people who are watching the videos, right? Who are fans of these musicians. And that irks me. You know, I'm like, I can't, like, for example, I posted a video about David Bowie. And it was more opinionated than my usual work. Usually I'm just like facts, right?
And I remember that one because I loved it. It was great.
I liked it too. It was very much me being like, this is an artist who means a lot to me. And here's why, right? But I just got like ripped apart in the comments because, you know, child abuse, sexual abuser, blah, 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 all this stuff. And it was just like, I started out kind of with my rebuttals, and then I was just like, this is overwhelming. And it started to really get to me, and it started to get to the point where people were attacking my followers. And I was just like, okay, I'm gonna have to take this one down. So I took it down. I haven't reposted another one about Bowie yet because I'm a little bit kind of, I don't know, maybe mini traumatized by that, you know, like, but other artists
of sorts. Yeah.
You know, there are other artists too, like who I would love to talk about, but who are controversial, and who get a lot of hate. Like they're just going to get a lot of hate. And so I think that what that taught me was that I need to keep my opinion sort of less at the forefront and more just stick to like the facts and stuff like that, because there's less for people to attack. Right. So like to answer your question, yes, it totally does affect me, but I try to prevent it as much as possible. And I try to be on top of it. So like now I'm at the point where like if someone is starting to really go in hard, I'm just like, I'm blocking you. You're blocked. You know what I mean? You're gone.
Yeah, exactly.
Because like I don't have time for it. You know what I mean? I'm like, I'm not going to sit here and write and educate you. You know, like you clearly have no interest in learning anyway. So, or having a meaningful discussion. So I'm just going to block you. Right. So
you're not a 6th grade teacher, you know, like, you know, if kids, you know, if they get out of line, you know, that's, you know, and that was one of the things too, is that I learned that, you know, over the 12 years or so that I've been a music writer, is that, you know, I'm very opinionated, but like you said, or like we were talking earlier, like I kind of took on that Lester Bangs kind of persona, because when people started trolling me when I wasn't even trying to do, I was just like, well, fuck this. This is fun. I'll give them something to troll. Do you know what I mean? And then like,
fair enough.
But then all of a sudden I was like the asshole blogger, you know, which was like, you know, and so, you know, but one of the things I tried to always do is to not go after someone on a personal level. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
totally. And when I mean personal level, I mean like, you know, I got into an internet battle with Sebastian Bach from Skid Row probably a few years ago that lasted 2 days online.
No way.
Oh, it was hilarious. Like it made all the news outlets on which I was super happy with. It was the biggest like
that's crazy
of my blog ever. But, you know, it was about his performance and about how his voice went, but like I never went at him and was just like, you know, I didn't talk about his family. I didn't bring up any kind of like mental health issues or whatever. Like to me, that's off. That's
totally
out of bounds.
Yeah.
You know. Now, if I want to say, I went to your show, dude, you sucked. Like your voice is blown out. Like you can't sing. You had backing tapes, whatever. Like, and he's going to like, then that's, you know, it's fair game because that's part of my opinion. But it's amazing, like you said, how people will still jump in and tear you apart because, you know, what do you know? Like, you're a fat blogger who probably lives in his mom's basement. I go, no, I live in my wife's basement. Yeah. You know.
I mean, and the criticism that I get sometimes bothers me too. Like I get a lot of boomer men who really,
of course you do.
Weird. I know they're not known for that at all, but yeah, they'll come at me and they'll just be like, "What do you know? You're." You know, a kid, whatever. And I'm like, first of all, I'm not a kid. Like,
yeah, right.
Thank you. Well, like just because I'm younger than you doesn't make me a kid. And it's just like, and I'll say it a lot where I'm just like, I don't have to be in my 60s to understand music. Like, I'm sorry. You know what I mean? I know I'm just like, sorry. I'm sorry that the things you grew up with are now history. But history is available for all, you know, like, so I try to go at it in that way, but yeah, it's like the you're female and you're young thing really pisses me off. So when I start going for that angle, which I find is a really cheap angle to go with, especially since I don't have anything to prove. I've got like hundreds of videos. You know what I mean? And like, if you want to know my background, if you want to know like what I know about music, it's there. it's available. Right. You know what I mean? And I also post all of my sources on my website. So it's like, if you want to look into what I'm talking about, feel free. Like, I'll show you exactly where I got it.
Right.
But, you know, they still come for me. So nothing you can do about it, you know. And I get that, like, sometimes it can be a little bit cringy seeing someone who you don't think should be talking about the music, talking about it, right? And you'll be like, and I'm like aware of what I am, you know, I'm aware I'm like, you know, this white female, you know, and it's like, I get that, like, I'm not the voice who should be speaking for all artists. But it's like, I'm talking about history and the love of music, you know, so I try to just keep it on that and keep the positivity. And, you know, like, I try to support the love and passion of music that everyone feels. You know, I'm not talking about, you know, what like the debauchery of the 70s, you know, like, or how bad groupies are, or like anything like that. You know what I mean? Like, that's not what I'm getting into. I'm talking about the music. So yeah, I try to keep it on subject, I guess.
Well, it's amazing because like, I love what you say, like, boomer men. Like, I love that because, of course, like, you know, and I can actually guarantee you, even some Gen X men, you know, like my age, you know, and
millennial men,
you know, just, you know,
and women, they're sometimes really bad too.
Well, you know, like, I can almost guarantee that you're also probably experiencing, like, you know, nowhere in between. Like, you're either getting totally creeped on by guys, or you're getting totally, like, just annihilated by guys, you know, or like, you know, and
both,
exactly,
both at all times.
But one of the things I love what you were just talking about was about how, like, you know, somebody will come in and maybe hit you with, like, you know, what do you know about this? You're young, da da da. It's almost like sometimes people of a certain age, maybe even my age, which is weird because I don't consider myself old or in that group of people, but some people are kind of threatened by the fact that their musical past or whatever is now considered history, because they're having to kind of be forced with the whole idea, like, you're old, dude. You know what I mean? And, like, but
it's,
you know, for someone like me, though, like I was telling you earlier, like, I am super excited to sit down and talk about what it was like to see, you know, I don't know, see Poison headline an arena with, you know, a little band called Tesla opening for them, you know, and, you know, or seeing, you know, Rat take out this little band called Queensryche, you know, as an opening act. And, you know, so, like, I'm excited to talk about that stuff, but some people, and, like, if I saw you talking about it, I'd be like, oh, fuck it. That's so cool that there's a younger person that actually cares to know this shit, you know? But, like,
I feel that. Yeah, absolutely.
So what do you think it is that kind of has some of those people threatened or makes them
I think you nailed it. I think you nailed it. It's just like, it's what we were talking about at the beginning. It's the whole gatekeeping thing, right? It's like, this is my music, you know, like, and it's something that I used to argue with my dad a lot about, because he was the boomer music geek, you know what I mean? He was obsessed. And that's really, like, where the foundation of it came from for me. But it's like, they really feel like, you know, it was a magical time for them. And it was, you know, something that no one else can really understand. And, like, they're holding on to that memory so tight that, like, they can't accept that, you know, other generations are going to look at it from a new perspective. You know, and I think there's a lot of insecurity, especially these days, with, like, sort of what we were talking about before with, like, cancel culture, you know, and it's like, don't come after my band, right? Like, this fear of, like, the new generations, like, looking at it with, like, a more liberal perspective. Somebody seems to be lighting off fireworks in my neighborhood right now. I don't know.
No, I can't.
I don't know. But
Happy
anyway,
Easter.
Right? Like, what's going on? But yeah, Yeah, I think it's like, for example, David Bowie, you know what I mean? Like, and if you're someone who grew up with him and you're absolutely in love with his music, and then like this younger generation comes and goes, well, actually, he was a pedophile, you know, like it's really hard, I think, for people to hear that and accept that. Michael Jackson, another really great example. Michael Jackson inspired a generation of people. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, and is very beloved by a lot of those people, even still to this day. But if you bring him up on TikTok, you know what's going to happen. You know what I mean? So,
and that's so interesting because, you know, my wife and I kind of talk about this sometimes about some of the bands that I grew up with as, you know, as a teenager, you know, and when you're like 16, you know, like you're kind of at that age where, you know, or maybe even like 15 and 16 where like everything is about girls. Like if you're a guy, you know, or I mean, if that's your sexual preference,
totally,
you know what I mean?
I get what you're saying. Yeah.
And which again is something I would have never even said 30 years ago. Do you know what I mean? Or even said, you know, but anyway, what I was getting at is that you know, we were talking about this and is that, you know, like it was awesome for me to see, you know, I don't know, like, you know, Bobby Brown being sprayed down with a fire hose and a Warrant video. And I was like, oh my God, she's so hot, you know? And then I'm looking back on it now, I'm going, what the fuck were people thinking? Like that is absolutely like not cool at all.
Exactly.
But you know, Winger singing 17, you know, she's only 17. Daddy says she's too young, but she's old enough for me. And I just remember going, I loved that song. I'm like, I was like, what the hell was
the Stones?
Oh my God.
The Stones. There's so much, like, I'm a big Rolling Stones fan.
Some girls,
there are
like, you know, I was just
Brown Sugar.
Oh yeah.
You know, and
it's like you're speechless, right? It's like you're like, I don't even know what to say.
And that's where the fear comes from, right? Like with these older generations who are so in love with this music, they're like, don't attack my music, you know, like, and it's because when we listen to it with our 2022 ears, we're like, wow, that's actually quite problematic, you know?
Right.
And I understand that fear. I don't really know how to address it. And honestly, this comes up like kind of a lot is like, how do we address that problem? You know what I mean? Of like these artists who were so incredibly influential in culture, you know, like the Stones, Michael Jackson, David Bowie, these people we're talking with, these are not small artists. Like these are the biggest artists in the world.
AC/DC,
you know, and
Led
it's
Zeppelin,
like,
you know, like
Zeppelin, you know, like there's John Lennon, you know, like there's so many, and it's just like, I don't think it's fair to be like, you're no longer allowed to listen to that music because we have found some problems in some of the work that this artist has done or in their personal life, etc. Right. It's just really, I think it goes back to what I was saying before about like how music is so powerful, literally life-saving, you know, and it's like, how are you going to tell like a person who grew up gay in the 70s and who like needed David Bowie to live, you know what I mean? Like literally, like, how are you going to be like, now you're not allowed to listen to him anymore? Like, that's just not realistic. You know what I mean? And I don't know what the answer is. Like, it's a difficult one for people like us, you know what I mean? Who like analyze music and talk about music. Like, I don't know how to address those things, you know, like.
Well, you know, like one of the things you were just talking about, like you were talking about how we're kind of in this time of, you know, cancel culture, you know, and, you know, it wasn't part of a generation that I was part of when, you know, it wasn't part of my generation as a younger, you know, kid, but like at the same time, like I do remember like my you know, my father who, you know, we didn't have the best relationship, but we were both drawn together by music. And my dad was very proactive in wanting to hear what I was listening to, mainly because he was a music fan and he wanted to kind of have his finger on it. And I remember my dad listening to songs like, you know, like by Wasp or whatever. And my dad going, like, you do realize that that's not cool, right? Like that is pretty degrading to women. And I was like,
totally.
I'm like, yeah, but it's a great. My dad's like, all right, he goes, but as long as you know that these are songs, like you don't do that, you know? And
totally.
So, and so like looking back on it now, you know, how we address it now, like people like you and I, is that I find that there's a difference between cancel culture and awareness, like
accountability.
Do you know what I mean? Like I can acknowledge that a majority of the bands that I listened to maybe as a kid were misogynistic pigs or whatever.
Yeah.
But it doesn't take away from the importance that
of
bands
the
like,
art,
you know, David Lee Roth and Poison and Rat and, you know, I don't know, you know, bands like that they played as a part of a soundtrack of my life.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I can't say like I'm never going to listen to Wasp again because they used to have a woman tied to a rack on their stage. You know what I mean? But like I could look at it now and go, that was terrible. But I was like, damn, that first album got me through a lot of shit. You know what I mean? And so,
definitely.
Where's that line? You know, I mean, like it's like and
I think everyone is going to have a different line. You know what I mean? Based on their own personal experiences. And I think that that's okay. You know what I mean? Like, and I think that we need to sort of be more accepting of like where people's differences are on that level. Right. Like, for like, again, like just to take it back to what I was saying, like with Bowie, it's like some people are going to have more of a connection to that music than others. Right. So it's like, it's okay. You know what I mean? For people who don't have a connection to it to not listen to it, you know, like it's okay, you know, like, and it's just because he's a legend, you know, it's not prerequisite listening kind of thing. So it's like, do we need to tear people like that down? You know, do we need to stop everyone from listening to it because you don't want to listen to it kind of thing? It's an ongoing discussion, I think. And it's all a part of like our culture realizing the error of our ways in the past, right? So it's just how we all grow, but I don't think it's necessary to just throw all of that art away at the same time, right? It's like, look at Picasso. Picasso was like a total womanizing dickhead. Right. Just, you know what I mean? But we're not going to like just stop looking at Picasso's art. You know, like he was still incredibly influential. He was still very important to visual art. Right. So it's like, I don't know. Yeah, it's a tough conversation because I can't even tell you the number of requests I have for people like Michael Jackson. And I'm just like, you know what would happen. That's something you know exactly what will happen if I do that. Like, so, and I'll be honest with them too. I'm just like, I'm not at the level yet where I feel powerful enough to cover that and not just get ripped apart.
Which is so funny because as you were just talking about that, you know, we kind of referenced Zeppelin but if you were to talk about Jimmy Page, would people bring up the fact that he dated 16-year-old girls and things like that? Or would people be more likely to be like, do you know what I mean? So like, to me, it's, you know, so like when you're coming up with this stuff, one of the things I love what you said about the Bowie part was that like when you took the video down was because you felt like it was a little too a opinion piece as opposed to, do you feel like that if you go into one of these acts and you're talking pretty heavily about the art or their output and whatnot, that it's actually going to deter people from it? Or is it just kind of like hunting season, like regardless of what you're saying?
Like, I mean, I'll get a lot of people who are like, you need to stop like raising up these people. You need to stop sort of like shining a light on people who did bad things, kind of stuff. And like, that's when I get kind of flustered when people bring that up, you know what I mean? Because I'm like, yeah, you know, like, you are right. You know, you're not wrong. Like, what Jimmy Page did, like, you know, was wrong.
Right.
I'm not going to say it wasn't. Does it mean that like we should like throw Stairway to Heaven in the bin and never listen to it again?
Yeah.
Not so much. You know what I mean? Like, so I don't, and it's hard because like I said, like everyone's going to have a different line. Right. And like to some people, that's to someone who was assaulted when they were 16, that's going to be a lot of a bigger deal than to someone who wasn't, you know? And it's like, I'm not going to say to them that their feelings aren't valid. You know, it's like, it's tough. It's tough. And I think, you know, you really have to go at it with like every individual case, you know? So that's why I tend to just stick to the facts.
I mean,
it's
because
just an easier way to avoid all of that, you know? So.
And to not say it or to address it isn't saying that it didn't happen. It's just
precisely, yeah.
You know,
it's just like, it's like I was saying about how I keep it to 3 minutes, right? It's like, if I'm talking about Bowie's work on Ziggy Stardust, I'm probably not going to be mentioning what he was doing backstage in the 70s because it has nothing to do with the music. You know what I mean?
It's irrelevant to the topic that you're addressing.
Exactly. So I'm not going to be like, and also, you know, he was sleeping with 14-year-old groupies, you know, like it's just it's not necessary to the story I'm telling. Right. So.
But if that was the topic that you were going for, now, have you ever like been tempted at all to just to be like, I want to go there.
Totally.
And talk about that. But like,
yeah.
That's
the problem is like, I think the problem is like, if I'm going to do that, I have to have an answer. You know what I mean? I have to have like a way that I think could be a solution to this. And I don't, you know, like, and I don't know that like I'm ever going to. I don't know that anyone's ever going to. Like, it's such a difficult thing to approach, you know, for all the reasons that we just discussed, right? Because like, it's very delicate for some people. So on both ends, some people are very affected by music. Some people are very angry about why those artists are famous. So it's, you know, very complicated.
Well, then it also kind of takes away or maybe even steers away from the whole concept of what you're wanting to do with your TikTok channel and your Instagram channel, because, you know, you're not what, like, I don't know that I would be upset, but I think that if I watched one of your videos one day and you were just like the horrible sex habits of Jimmy Page, I would want to be like,
that's not what I'm about. You know,
I would be like, no, I want to hear music shit. Please, Vanessa, tell me something I don't know about Jimmy Page. That's, you know, and
it would seem like I was doing it for views. You know what I mean? It would seem like I was doing it to like make a viral video or something. And I'm not, that's not my goal with like any of my work. So
I'll start winding things down here for you, but sure. This has been great talking to you, by the way.
Yeah, awesome. For sure.
Awesome. Yeah. So have you been approached at all by people in the industry? Like, I don't know, be it radio, whatever, or I mean, just, or even artists in general that you've covered. Have you been contacted by people? And like, if so, like, what has your experience been with that?
So I get contacted a lot. Like, I have a lot of the children of these artists following me.
Oh,
yeah. So like, I have like Randy Bachman's daughter follows me.
Oh wow.
Recently, okay. Recently, like Chad Smith from the Red Hot Chili Peppers, his daughter followed me. Yeah. So that's kind of neat when that happens. And actually, like Randy Bachman's daughter actually got in touch and was like, if you're covering my dad, I work with him every day, and I could definitely get some like inside information for you. And I was like, wow, So
That's amazing.
I recently had an indie artist named Dan Mangan. I don't know if you know who he is, Canadian indie artist. He started following me and he's like, I love your work. And I was like, wow, I went to your show in 18, like, so that's really cool when that happens. As for like the industry, not so much. And it's funny because I've had people message me being like you need to get in touch with George Stroumboulopoulos is a big one that people say to me. And I'm like, because he's Canadian, he sort of does the similar thing. And I have reached out to him and I heard nothing back. And then other people will be like, I reached out to him and was like, you need to hear about Raised by Hippies. And still no word. So I'm just like, okay, maybe I'm not big enough yet. I don't know.
The door's open, man.
Yeah, it would be really exciting to hear about that from anyone in sort of that industry. But I do get like a lot of random companies who want me to be like a spokesperson for them and things like that. So we'll see. I had one woman offer to publish a book for me, and I was like, I don't really know what a book would be about, but now it's kind of planted in my head. So I'm like, maybe I will write something. I don't know.
There's never too many music books. I'm telling you.
Yeah, and even if I just release it as sort of like an ebook or something like that, I don't know. But we'll see. The next thing I'm working on is YouTube. I really want to get a YouTube channel up and going, and I want to start traveling, going to different cities and sort of like doing videos in the places where it happened, starting with Detroit because I live very close to Detroit.
Oh, okay,
yeah. I live like across the river from Detroit, so there's just endless music and history stories in Detroit. So I'll start with that, see where that goes, and maybe do sort of like a bit of a tour type of thing, and then in the future. But yeah, we'll see. See what happens.
So another thing I've also learned about, and again via my wife through TikTok and everything, is that a lot of times TikTokers who have lots of views or whatever are offered like endorsements or anything and things like that. Like, what kind of endorsements are available for a music dork? You know what I mean? Like,
music apps.
Okay.
Like I have a music streaming service who I work with. I have another one that's like a music discovery app where it's sort of like is connected with Spotify. And yeah, music apps, stuff. Stingray is the company who owns the streaming site that I'm working with. And I would love to work more with Stingray and, Spotify and companies like that. But that's really sort of what you're going for.
Yeah.
And then of course there's other sort of branches, like fashion companies and things like that, like vintage companies who start to reach out. I've had a number of like vintage t-shirt sellers and things like that come to me. Yeah. It's about like choosing who you want to work with, I guess. So
right. Well,
so like, as long as if you're giving me money,
I'll just take free shit. I don't need to have money in general. Like, just give me free stuff. I like stuff.
Yeah, I'll take a pair of headphones, whatever. Like,
same here. And so I guess to close out real quick is that obviously part of your research, and you and I kind of talked about this, was documentaries. And what are a few of the documentaries you've watched lately that have
been inspiring,
made quite an impact on you?
Questlove's new documentary, the one that he just won the Oscar for, Summer of Soul. Strongly recommend. Yeah. It's about a soul festival that took place in Harlem in the New York area. And it was as big, if not bigger than Woodstock, but nobody knows about it because it was all like soul artists and Black artists.
Right.
And all the press sort of went to Woodstock. So that is a fascinating documentary. other like sort of older documentaries that I'm obsessed with would be I love anything Martin Scorsese's done. I think he's like the OG music documentary maker. He kills it. The Last Waltz.
The Last Waltz. I was just gonna say that.
It's that's sort of the cornerstone, I think, for all music documentaries. Like that is the ultimate. And then geez, what's another one? One of my favorites is No Direction Home, Bob Dylan.
Fantastic.
Brilliant, right? Yeah, like there's a lot for sure. And and I love documentaries. Like I grew up watching documentaries, so
the George Harrison one.
There's one about John Prine coming out soon.
Oh, now that I'd like to see.
Yeah, about his record label, which will be really great. So yeah, there's endless documentaries for sure.
Well, that is awesome. Well, Vanessa, this is so great to talk to you, and like I totally enjoyed this.
Yep.
This was super cool. And are you going to make a TikTok video about me? About this?
I'm definitely going to let people know. We'll exchange information afterwards. But
I'm really not that. I don't know that you'd find 3 minutes of fascinating information on me, to be honest.
Well, send me your book because I'm really interested for sure, because like I said, I'm just started to dig into learning a little bit more about metal music, and I would love to read about your journey. I know I said I don't have any time, and I don't. But I'll find the time. We'll figure it out. So
it's great toilet reading. Like 4 trips, you probably finish it. Like I'm
excited for sure.
I'm wordy. I'm not deep, so, but, well, so I guess, let's see. So if people wanting to look to connect with you on TikTok, you're there under raised_by_hippies, correct?
Yep.
And the same on Instagram. So,
same on Instagram. Yep. I mean, you could really just Google it. It comes up, and on my website, I have all my links to everything that I do. So all my Spotify playlists and everything.
So Raised by Hippies, Vanessa Hughes on TikTok, music historian extraordinaire and just all around badass. I am so psyched you took the time to talk, and thanks for doing this.
All right. Thank you so much. This has been awesome. I appreciate it.